My mic is off, your voice is on. This is Social Watch. We want to take a look at some of your reactions on social media. We had posed a question to you. It was an opinion poll on Instagram, and we wanted to find out what your thoughts are. And we were asking you, are you concerned about the current changes in climate patterns and why? Now, 25% said no, and 75% said yes. This is about 3/4 of the numbers said they're concerned, and then a quarter said they are not concerned. Let's take a look at some of your reactions and get to find out why 25% said yes and why 25% said no and 75% said yes. So at Dan Kangema on WhatsApp, this is WhatsApp, says, yes, we are the continent that releases the least waste in the planet. Yet, we are the ones that suffer the most. African leaders really need to put their foot on the ground, excuse me, and demand for better deals from the world when it comes to climate change. This is something we picked up with you, Yvonne. What kind of deals should African leaders be looking for?
I don't know that it's necessarily deals that Africa should be looking for. I think Africa already has a very strong negotiating force on the global front, and they've executed that incredibly well, even leading up to the Paris Agreement. I think where the opportunity now is for Africa to lean on research and innovation and development that's also coming out of the developed world and using that to implement within our own country spaces. I think that would be very beneficial to us at this point in time.
Okay, let's take a look at another reaction. Who do we have next? At Onyango Papa says, yes, Kenya is truly suffering from the effects of climate change. We have cut down all trees and invaded forest. Water sources have now dried, making life unbearable for both man, plants, and animals. In the manufacturing sector, the government zero-rated timber to just kind of discourage deforestation in the country and encourage manufacturers to import their timber.
Yes, and that came high on the ban on logging in Kenya. That means then that policy is geared towards preserving our forests. It's a welcome policy because then we are simply saying bring it from elsewhere. But the question is, elsewhere is where? Where there is timber in abundance. So we got to balance so that even as we say bring it from elsewhere, we got to actually enhance our own forest cover. So we need to put money in planting of our own forests. We cannot rely on some forest, I don't know, somewhere else.
The president says 1.8 billion trees by 2022. Is that possible?
Anything is possible.
Anything is possible.
How do we go about it? Is the question.
Yes, and you have a youth population that is booming with energy. Let me use the word booming with energy. And that's what we are saying, that if we engage the youth into understanding their actions now, they'll actually transform tomorrow.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's take a look at another reaction. At Alex Marisha says, yes, those of us who have practiced rain-fed agriculture know best. The patterns have made it almost impossible for farmers to make any produce out of the planting season. This is something we picked with you, Sylvester. Okay.
Yeah, but I think also on that point, it's important for farmers, and we didn't really discuss this before, but it's important for people in the agriculture space to also be very aware and get educated on understanding the trends, right? Because if we have a plethora of research that's coming out, especially out of the Kenya Meteorological Department. They publish and they release patterns and trends every month, and farmers really need to get access to this data, because if you look at the patterns around the country, we're actually, climate change, because of the impacts of climate change, there are areas that are experiencing a 5% to 10% increase in rainfall. It's just that the shift has happened in the seasons. So maybe the shorter rains are longer than they used to be, and the longer rains are shorter than they used to be. So the farmers need to be in touch with this data so that they can use it for planning better.
And they should be empowered to think today, not yesterday. Because yesterday we planted based on seasons. Now we need to harvest the water when it's available and plant tomorrow.
Exactly.
They must move with time.
Okay.
So we need to get wiser. We really do need to get smarter and wiser.
Okay, now we move on to Instagram, where at Machiavelli says, yes, because African leaders do not seem to understand the magnitude of the effects that will hit us in no time. A rise in temperature means the whole ecosystem changes, Africa included. Okay.
That's true. Yeah.
Let's take a look at another reaction. This is by Machiavelli. We've already sampled. Let's take a look at another. At Beatrice Gaturi, Kenya says, yes, I am concerned about climate change because it is clear the world is deteriorating. Where I live in Lodwar, we rarely have rain, and when we do, we have flash floods. The planet is communicating, and we listen to it before it's too late, and we need to listen to it rather before it's too late. There's no planet B, or rather plan B.
I mean, I think the Turkana case is especially really critical for us to think about as a country. You know, around the world, we're talking about 1.5 degree shift in 12 years. Turkana is already experiencing between 2 and 3 degree shift in the past 30 years, which is that's significant when you think about what it's doing to their local water, what it is doing to their, I mean, the temperatures there, it's 42 degrees, you know, in an afternoon. And if you look at research around the world that tells us a human being cannot be productive in anything above 35 degrees Celsius. So it tells you the productivity in Turkana is also going to be an issue. So I mean, I completely agree with her comment. And especially with the development that's happening in Turkana now, that is an area where we need to really pour a lot of resources, a lot of manpower, because Turkana is really experiencing some harsh impacts of climate change.
Okay, let's take a look at another one. Atoma Jenna says, why don't we all as Kenyans decide that for every rainy season we will do a countrywide tree planting exercise and stick to that plan? If we do that consistently for 10 years, kwa ground vitu zitakuwa different.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, these are the kind of ideas and the kind of thinking that is what we need right now.
Wonderful. And we have 160,000 kilometers of road network. If you just did 5 meters of trees on either side of the road, you can imagine how Kenya will be green as you drive through.
Now, we want to cross over to you because we're always saying Metropol Debrief, we want to center this conversation around you. So we went to the streets and we wanted to find out what are your take or what are your thoughts on climate change. And this is Word on the Street, and this is what you had to say listening to Street Talk.
Yes. When I was young, the rains used to come during a certain month, but nowadays, you see, it has dramatically changed.
We are going very soon to lack water for the trees, and because of that, we are going to have now patterns changing in terms of, because of that effect of deforestation.
Okay, vile sasa tunaona wanasema temperatures zinaongezeka. Ice ya ile iko kwa sea, sijui rise in sea levels, vitu kama hiyo.
The rate to which the trees are being brought down in our nation is wanting.
So we will be graduating slowly from highland, the lands that were very suitable for agriculture, becoming a desert.
Because of bad climate, we get either drought or we get too heavy rains that would cause the same government of that same county or the same region to use what was planned for the benefit of people now to help them come out of the hazard.
The government should rise up in terms of upgrading meteorological department. We are asking the government to at least inject money. Give them money.
I mean, people should take responsibilities. They are being paid. They are earning our money. These people here are being tasked, and we are paying cabinet ministers who are just there. They are doing nothing.
Well, Kenyans on the streets, a very emotive topic because it affects their very livelihood. Sometimes when you think about climate change, you think it's a big topic, a global conversation, but it always trickles down to the Kenyans on the ground. Yvonne, your 2 cents.
I 100% agree with the sentiments shared by every single one of them. And I think what's also really interesting is that you know, climate change can seem like this very complex, big word that, you know, people don't necessarily they don't really know how to engage with it. But when you hear what they're saying, and they're talking about how patterns have changed, how the rains have changed, how they used to experience rain at this time and now it's not coming, that is someone who's completely aware that climate is changing. It's just that maybe the technicalities around it is where the complication comes. And I think that's where we have an opportunity for capacity building, to really enable people to not just understand what climate change as a whole is, but how best they can adapt and how they can integrate that into their everyday things.
Sylvester?
Yes, that we are all affected or impacted in this climate change phenomena. And we need to rise up and do our part in our own small way. It makes a difference.
Well, before we wind up, because we've almost come to a close of Social Watch and also a close of the show, we asked you to send us a video comment of what your thoughts are on this whole climate issue. And Patricia Boye sent us a video comment, and this is what she had to say in that video comment. Listen in.
I don't think any of the protests by the youth around the world is going to make any difference in the government's response to climate change. For instance, my grandmother back at home, she still uses her firewood. So whether I'm on the streets campaigning against climate change or not, that won't change her lifestyle. And I'm not speaking of my grandmother alone. I'm speaking of the different rural villages back in Kenya where there is no access to electricity and the only mode of fuel is firewood, probably. Okay, let's look at it this way. In the international zone, we have the COP conferences that are held every year. And each and every year, some of the biggest funders of the COP event are the biggest polluters in the world. So they're using these COP events as a cover-up for the pollution that they cause and the emissions that they release each and every year. And the government still participates in these activities. We had a campaign over the COP22 and saying that they should kick out the big polluters out of the conference, but still it went ahead, it happened. The sponsors still sponsored. So I'm not seeing any change from the government any soon, because in a one way or another, they still get to benefit from the pollution. They still get the payments that are made by the polluters for the cover up, for the shadowing. What is it called? For the green shadowing. And they're not going to change anything.
They're not going to change anytime. It's a double-edged sword. You pollute, just like you said, you pollute, you clean. The deeper your pockets run, the more we can give you leeway. How do we move forward, finally?
I mean, I said this earlier on, I think we need to move beyond the government political sphere of action, because there's only... You can bang your head against something for so long, and if you don't see any action on that, you need to look beyond that. And I think that's why the youth movements and the striking are being very effective, because they're causing a ripple effect of action in other sectors which are equally as, if not more important than the government section, in my opinion. For example, in the private sector, and as I mentioned earlier, you're seeing a lot of very big private sector players committing to action on climate change. An example coming out of the strikes is Burger King. This huge company, this big polluter, have removed all the plastic toys out of their boxes for kids. Why? Because they know that is something that is contributing to their carbon emissions, and so they're going to cut that out. That has such a tremendous impact when you think about it on a wide scale. So I think those kind of actions, especially within the private sector, are equally as important, and I'm focusing on those now.
She mentioned a very important point that I'd like you to pick up on as we wind up very briefly in 30 seconds, that we can raise our voices in the streets of Nairobi. But if that effort does not trickle down to the grassroots, and we ensure that maybe we change our mode of lifestyle, change from firewood to renewable energy, then we are not achieving much.
Yes, but you got to replace it with something. But my final words would be that everything has a price. It's time now the world put a price to the carbon footprint on every product that is in the market. Then the consumer is informed on what he is buying. These big polluters, as we know them, will transform naturally. Everything's got a price.
Well, thank you very much, Sylvester. Thank you, Yvonne. And this is not a conversation that we can exhaust today. This is a conversation that we will always have. Should we see any change, should we see Kenya making strides in the right direction, or even lagging behind, then it would be up to us to have this conversation again and remind them what trajectory they should take. Thank you for making time. Well, last words, everything has a price. We just have to figure out how much are we buying ourselves out of climate change. For Metropol TV and Metropol Debrief, I have been Ondura Gang. I'll see you again next week on Thursday.